Hello! Welcome to I Tarot, where the reader is bubbly, but the readings can get dark. So today I am going to be working on the 2026 reading for Cancer. Let's see what's going on for the Cancerians. Overarching Energy. Are you guys okay? Let's try that again. There we go. The 9 of Wands. Interesting. Okay. January. Five of Cups. 10 of Wands in reverse. February. Eight of Wands. March. Two of Swords in reverse. April. Seriously, Cancer, are you guys good? The cards look okay. Ooh, April, the Emperor in reverse. May. Eight of Cups in reverse. Five of Wands in reverse. June. Three of Cups in reverse. July. Star. August. Son of Cups. September. Three of Wands. October. Mother of Wands. November. Ten of Pentacles, Daughter of Pentacles in reverse. And December. The World and the Moon in reverse. Interesting. Now let's see what the Alchemy deck has to say. One card per quarter. First quarter, 10. Second quarter, Jupiter. Third quarter, Venus. Fourth quarter, the Moon. That's really interesting how most of your alchemy cards are planets. All right, let's get into it. Starting with tin. Malleable, expansive, Jupiter. Tin is a silvery white, highly malleable metal. This is in part because tin's structure is composed of crystals in cubic or tetragonal formations that can be broken or crushed under moderate pressure. When the crystalline structure breaks, a sound known as the tin cry can be heard, hence the unnerving sound of crinkling tinfoil. Such is the energy of the tin card. On one hand, it is in tin's Jupiterian nature to expand, to mobilize, to cover the whole territory. On the other hand, the metal cannot withstand much weight or pressure. When this card appears, you may have reached a limit or breaking point after taking on more than is logistically possible under the circumstances. Don't take this juncture personally. More strength is required before taking next steps to support the expansion you see in your mind's eye. Starting off with January, we're looking at the Five of Cups and the Ten of Wands in reverse. And the feeling that I get here is that what was it? What's it called? Sunken cost theory, sunken investment theory, something like that. Where it's like you've invested so much into something and you're still in that energy of not disbelief, but you're still in that energy of feeling that loss. But a big part of why you're still feeling that loss is because of all of the things that you invested into it. It's not the thing itself that you're grieving, it's the energy and the time, the investment that you made into it that you're grieving. This kind of reminds me of The Little Prince. It's this book that was originally in French. And I'm sure a lot of you know it because it is a pretty famous book. But to those who don't, it's basically about a prince that kind of travels the universe. He travels the galaxy, looking for his rose or something. Or he ran away from his rose, and then he was, kind of like going around the galaxy and missing her, and kind of realizing along the way that what made her special to him was his investment into her, because he ends up like coming to earth and then seeing this whole rose bush and being like, oh, so she's common actually, because on his planet she was the only one, and he's like, oh, she's actually common, and then he feels kind of dumb about it, like, oh, I was treasuring her, but she's like all over, whatever. But long story short, the whole point of it is that when we love something, part of what makes the object of our love so special is the love that we have for it. And that's kind of why I talk about how, people, they kind of measure themselves with these metrics, of appearance or wealth or fitness or whatever, and the world kind of teaches you that these things are supposed to matter somehow, when what ends up making people so special is the very love that we have for them. You're not to say that people aren't inherently special, but it's the love that we have for them that makes them so irreplaceable. So if you're in a position where you're thinking, oh, they can always do better, or I can do better, ask yourself, what is better? Seriously, what is better? And then we kind of go into this whole tangent about how I feel about my dogs, where it's like, I know that I can find better dogs elsewhere. I know that there are better behaved dogs out there, but I don't go out looking for other dogs because I love my dogs. And if you ask me why I love my dogs, I have no idea, but I love my dogs. It's probably because of all the memories that I have with them, and all of the time and love and care that I've invested into helping them heal, because both of them have some pretty traumatic backstories, and I was there for all of it. And that is what builds the bond. So anyway, basically, this thing here that you're grieving, and you might be asking yourself, why am I grieving this? It ended for a reason. It's because you're still grieving all of the time and energy that you can't get back, that you put into this thing. But I feel like it's important to say here that all of that time and energy, I mean, yeah, you can't get it back, but it wasn't all for naught. Nothing that we go through in life is ever for naught. And I hate to subscribe to that, very stereotypical, common, overly used and overly misused phrase that everything happens for a reason. I think it's a little more nuanced than that. It's a little more complicated than that. Everything does indeed happen for a reason if you make sure that it doesn't go to waste. We act like we are just a gnat in the wind, just a jellyfish in the waves, getting washed around, helpless in our own lives, but that's not true. We have autonomy and personal power within the uncontrollable circumstances of life. Life is inherently unpredictable. Life is inherently beyond our control. But as the waves come crashing down, we always have to remember that we are the ones that still hold the reins here. We are the ones that still have choices to make here. And so, if you don't let that experience be for naught, if you let that experience teach you how to love better next time, how to be better next time, how to do better next time, if you turn it into a lesson, if you try to find some sort of meaning, some sort of purpose, and you don't let that suffering go to waste, and you use it instead as a building block for yourself, that's how you become someone who continues to grow, who continues to go upward. That time, that energy that you spent on this thing, whatever it wasn't for naught, it was experience. And dare I say, because I've always talked about how time is our most valuable resource, because it's the one thing in life that we cannot replenish, dare I say that experience is even more invaluable than time. Because there are a lot of people that use up their time without filling it with anything. There are a lot of people that spend their time just waiting for something else to happen instead of going out there, boots on the ground, building up experience. And this doesn't have to be professional, it can be romantic, it can be just experience for experience's sake. Going kayaking, jumping out of a perfectly good plane, doing things, just doing something to create memories with the time that we are allocated. So the real question here isn't about how much time you wasted, how much energy you wasted. It's, did you give it your best? And can you try to give your best again with what you've learned here? Going into February, you seem to have some sort of spark of inspiration. With the Two of Swords in reverse in March, that tells me that this has something to do with a self-realization. And now I'm thinking about that tin cry that they were talking about in the alchemy card. Tin is meant to expand, and when you try to crumple it up and shrink it, it has a cry. And now this Eight of Wands feels like that cry. And that cry alerts something in you. Because the Two of Swords is about refusing to see. It's also about trust, but for me, it's the willingly putting on a blindfold and refusing to see something. With the Two of Swords being in the reverse here, it feels like there's something within yourself that you haven't noticed before, that you haven't noticed until your circumstances changed. Because it's so easy to get into this lull, a false sense of security when you're in the same situation for a long time. But when you get out of it and your circumstances change, that's when you really see the stuff you're made of. And so the Two of Swords in reverse with the Eight of Wands and the Tin card, that's telling me that somewhere in between February and March, you have some realizations about yourself. And this is for the better. Another thing that's coming to mind here is that healing isn't just about feeling better. It's not just about feeling good. It asks for accountability. It asks for self-awareness. It asks for you to see yourself clearly and understand where you might be lacking. And the radical self-acceptance piece comes in because when you see these things, it's easy to go down the rabbit hole of self-loathing. That's why people don't do it. That's why people prefer to shield their ego or to refuse to accept that at some point in time, maybe they were shitty. At some point in time, maybe they hurt people. Maybe they were malicious. Or maybe they were giving their power away. But this radical self-acceptance, this self-love is so necessary in the healing process because without it, you will break. And there will be parts of you that keep flinching and pulling away every time you poke at a wound. But healing takes accountability. Healing takes seeing yourself very clearly and being very willing to take accountability through the pain and the shame that you might feel. And that's why it's a process that you can't do without self-love to some degree. Self-love it's not about giving yourself a consolation prize just for existing. That's not what it is. Then you're just spoiling the inner child. Self-love is realizing how flawed you are and still thinking that you're worth the investment of bettering yourself. Seeing how much work there still needs to be done and rolling your sleeves up and saying, let's do it. That is self love. It's not a take me as I am. It's I see how I am. I see what more I need to do. And because I love myself, I'm willing to do it. For example, when I got both of my dogs, both of them were nightmares for like the first year or 3 years for the other one. And of course, I loved them from the beginning. From the moment I took them home, I loved them. Does that mean that I should have been okay with them pooping everywhere, peeing everywhere, destroying everything in sight? No. Me loving them meant that I was willing to teach that out of them, to help them heal from their traumatic backstories and show them that love is patient. They were never perfect, and me loving them did not mean that I was willing to tolerate them destroying my house. Me loving them meant that I believed in them. I believed that they could do better, be better, and I was willing to help them do that. That's what me loving them looked like. And modeling from that, I think that that's what loving yourself looks like. Loving yourself means getting sick of your own BS and loving yourself enough to put in the work into becoming better. Understanding that having flaws does not make you beyond saving. It means you've got your work cut out for you. There's work that needs to be done, and you're going to do it. The Emperor in reverse in April feels like an ego collapse. This feels like the structures, your bone structure of your being, are being broken down. With the Eight of Cups in reverse and the Five of Wands in reverse, this also feels like dissolving. This feels like the imagery that I'm getting is like a war. So, you know how they'll face each other, and the guys at the front line are holding up their weapons, and they're just like, I have something behind me that I need to defend. And they create this border, right? And I'm also seeing countries, walls, borders, customs, things like that. But inside of you, there are certain borders inside of you that make up who you are as you have known yourself up until this point. Kind of a more rigid way of describing yourself. And that is dissolving. With the Eight of Cups in reverse, it's like you're leaving the need for definition behind. This is kind of similar to what I read for Gemini, actually. Because the Three of Cups showing up in June, Three of Cups is about harmony. But I think that harmony isn't the word for this. It's about, because if there's a need for harmony, that means that there's division to begin with. Three separate cups, three separate birds. Dissolving eliminates those boundaries. There's no more boundaries within yourself. There's no more spots that are tender to the touch. It's all up for grabs, is kind of the feeling that I'm getting here. Let's see what Jupiter's talking about. Expansion, possibility, fortune. Jupiter is often a welcome sight, emerging from the darkness, shimmering with possibilities. It is the planet of growth, expansion, success, and elevation. When this card appears, the future is full and bright, perhaps even dazzling. Everyone wants to be around Jupiterian energy and to claim a little for themselves, so there's likely a magnetic feeling at play. The work is to keep Jupiter's bigness in balance during the wave of expansion that's taking place. Its shadow is most easily seen in celebrity culture, excess consumption, and messaging of never enough. You may begin comparing yourself with others or assessing your value. Don't double judge yourself for this. Jupiter happens. Instead, realign with the benevolent message in your heart. What truly needs expanding? It's likely not your followers or your bank account. Yeah, so this really feels like dissolving for the sake of expansion. Because it's like you have all these limiting beliefs or these limiting structures within yourself of, oh, I need to make more money, or I need to keep going to the gym so that I can stay at a certain waistline. Going to the gym is not a bad thing. It's good to stay in shape, or to stay healthy, or to do whatever you can to stay healthy. But basically what I'm getting at is that you've had these metrics in your mind for the longest time of what you ought to be or what you have to do to keep up with what you think you need to be worthy. And all of that's going away. You're having a broader, you're developing this broader way of seeing yourself and existence itself, seeing the world itself. Um, I've been doing these like bedhead rants on TikTok where I just kind of open my eyes in the morning and then just start blabbering on about the first thing that pops into my head. Um, and something that I was talking about in the last one was about how, you know, you see a lot of this in the world, and when you notice it, you can't unnotice it. You know, being someone that almost died at 28, 29, yeah, I developed a way of seeing the world that I can't pretend I didn't. And it's that there are a lot of people out there that hide behind job titles, they hide behind good looks, like they hide behind things that they think will make them worthy because they lack substance. These are people that subscribed to the way that society brainwashes us into thinking that we have to break ourselves to be worthwhile. You know, I mean, women grow up reading magazines about 50 ways to please your man or keep your man. And men grow up being told to never cry, and, you know, they have to be macho and G.I. Joe. And you see all those action movies where they're jumping off of buildings and jumping away from grenades and, you know, taking bullets all to get the girl, you know, and it's kind of like it's this erosion of inherent self worth. You know, you have to put this makeup on, you have to maintain a certain waistline, you have to do these things to keep your man, you have to do these things to earn your woman, you have to make a certain amount of money, you have to hold a certain job title by age XYZ. And anyone that can't do that is a failure somehow. But the people that chase those ideals, the people that end up subscribing to that and living their lives based on them, end up with no substance. And it feels like this is what you're doing, is you're removing those boundaries, you're getting rid of the hard metrics, and you're starting to expand within yourself to recognize your inherent worth, your inherent divinity. You know, women are often taught that they have to give everything up. Everything that they have, they need to give away in order to be considered a good woman. You know, when you look at the way that they commend women that, you know, excel in their careers, they're like, yes, she did all this. She invented the cure for cancer, and she's a mom. And she juggles all of this with all of that. Look at her, just sacrificing everything, giving up every ounce of herself just to do the thing that she wants to do. The thing that she wants to do, she can't just blindly focus on that with someone else's support. No, she has to juggle it with being a mother, with being a wife, with being a good daughter. She can't just do the awesome thing and that's it. But the irony in that is that I know plenty of men that would rather be stay-at-home dads. You know, I know plenty of men that love to cook, love to maintain the home, and would rather do that than be seen as the macho breadwinner. I know plenty of women who want to excel in their careers, who want to do these groundbreaking things in the world, but gave birth too young, can't do it anymore. So they gave up their dreams. You know, but why is it a bad thing for women to get support? Why is it a bad thing for men to want to be supportive? Why is it emasculating somehow? You know, so these boundaries, these metrics that society feeds us and have brainwashed us with since birth benefit no one. They benefit no one except for large companies that are trying to sell you something. Buy our product so that even when you're 70 years old, you'll look like you're in your 30s. Buy our product so that women will flock to you. Pay for the gym membership so that you can get rock hard abs, and that's how you're going to get a woman to love you forever. It's all about exploitation, really. And people that don't understand their inherent worth, people that cannot exercise critical thinking, are easier to exploit. I mean, we see this in organized religion too, except what's being dangled on the string is a false sense of belonging. Think exactly like us, or you don't get to stay in the herd. So, this first half of the year for you, Cancer, is big. Maybe not big on the outside, but definitely big on the inside. This feels like you don't give a damn anymore if you fit in or not. This feels like you're prioritizing what makes you feel good, not how you can be useful for other people. Because going all the way back to January, this was about everything that you've given to the wrong thing. And maybe there's a part of you that did that because you thought that if you kept giving, that you would be more valuable somehow. And then there's the darker side of this, because that giving, let's admit it, was transactional. That giving was in hopes that your worth would be recognized. That giving was in hopes that you would be loved in return. It's not a bad thing to be generous, it's not a bad thing to give, but that's where you need to question your motives. Because I feel like with anxious attachers or codependent people, and this is not to defend avoidance in any way, because avoidance definitely need to learn healthy communication skills and to, I don't know, trust a little more. But with anxious attachers and codependency, what triggers avoidance really in that whole dynamic is that avoidance are hypersensitive to codependency because they have been engulfed in someone else's needs before. And when a person is needy, there's no room for your own needs. Even when the person isn't explicitly asking anything of you, you end up feeling like a scratching post, just something that just needs to be there to make someone else feel better. And they attach to you not because they love you, but because they just want someone, anyone, to accept them and accept their love and make them feel worthy. The danger of anxious attachers is that they see themselves as a martyr. They see themselves with that lens of like, oh, poor me, I give up everything, for this person. And it's implied that gratitude is expected, that presence is expected, that love is expected. It was never out of generosity. There's also a term, I think it was covert covert manipulation. And it's when someone says something like, oh, well, let me help you. I was only trying to do it for you. This is for your, sake. I'm doing this for you. And they frame it as if, they're just being concerned, or they just care. But the problem there is that they are also ignoring boundaries. They're ignoring autonomy. It's people that don't understand that balance that created avoidance to begin with. And I think that women tend to be more prone to falling into this trap of becoming an anxious attacher because they are kind of raised to be givers. Their worth in society, their worth in their households, their worth in their communities are based on how much they can give. And so that creates that mechanism inside their head of, I have to give to get love. Love has to be earned. And so now when they give, it becomes to earn love. And that's where that anxious attachment comes from. It's not just about how your parents were, how you were raised. We're seeing this on a societal scale because there's a lot of conditioning that we grow up with, whether we consented to it or not. It's all over the place. It's in the way things are worded. I mean, I saw like a soap opera that my mom watches, and one of the character went, well, maybe if you were more XYZ, you could keep your man. Why should I have to fight to keep something that should be mine? already. I mean, what about his autonomy here? Can't he just choose someone and stay with them? Where's the accountability there? But somehow it's this woman telling this other woman after she stole her boyfriend, maybe if you were more XYZ, you could have kept your man. So but you see what I mean there? The wiring there is that we have to do something. We have to go out of our way to do things in order to be worthy of love, when the truth is that you're inherently worthy of love. It's not about what you do, it's about who you are. And so your focus shouldn't be on what you can do for others, it should be on becoming your best self. And that's all that it should take. But yeah, that's how anxious attachment happens, especially in women. And I think that avoidance in men happens because they are denied their feelings. They are denied the ability to emote, to be softer. They're told that they have to toughen up every time they almost break. And so they don't get in touch with their emotions. And then the women in their lives need things of them, and they're just ill prepared to deal with the emotional needs of women. And so this creates this vicious cycle with anxious attachers and avoidance, because everyone's just trying to meet their own needs instead of just chilling out and being. And now avoidance, instead of doing the inner work, run around pushing everyone away, because even a shred of love or genuine concern doesn't feel genuine to them. It feels like control. It feels like ownership. It feels like oppression. And it feels claustrophobic. And so they run. They push people away when they really want connection. But closeness feels like being engulfed all over again. So, anyway, what I'm getting at is these patterns emerge in people who haven't taken accountability, haven't self reflected and taken accountability for what they have found. Avoidance justify it by saying, well, they're being controlling or they're being too much. Anxious attachers, codependent people, justify it by saying, well, I was just thinking of their well being. I was doing this for them. But none of them are taking accountability for the fact that they don't have healthy boundaries, one way or the other. But society glamorizes codependency. I mean, you see it in all of the romantic movies and whatnots, where somehow it's supposed to be a good thing that a woman wants to give everything up for someone else. And that's why these people don't feel the need to take accountability for their part. They just end up putting the victim badge on and going, poor me, I just need someone that'll accept my love. But that's not the case. It is a covert method of control. The intent there is a little more insidious than people are willing to see, because we have glamorized the ideal that women are supposed to give up everything. They're supposed to do that. They're supposed to become codependent. And when you're codependent, you can't see your own worth. And so you can't be independent. You can't stand alone. You can't find your inner equilibrium without external validation. So, anyway, this whole rant was about the first half of your year, where you're really tapping into. I don't think you're there yet, where you're not quite yet in the first half of the year, where you're like, okay, this is what I actually want to do. This is who I really am. And this is how I would be if I never got brainwashed to begin with. This is my true, authentic self. I don't think you're there yet, but you are dissolving to give room for that development later on. And we kind of see it here in the latter half of the year, because the star is about your hopes and dreams and wishes. The Son of Cups is about what makes your heart feel good, what feels right, and actually making a small gesture towards it. And the Three of Wands is about possibilities opening up. So it looks like July, August, September You're actually moving towards something that feels more authentic to you. This isn't this is the result of my personal growth kind of feeling. This is more of a this feels right, so I'm going to try it kind of energy. Let's look at Venus. Pleasure, eros, beauty. With the arrival of Venus, the senses open as if for the first time. It is the planet of pleasure, of touch, of sensual delights. Venus is often depicted as romance or eroticism between people, but it can also be experienced as an all out love affair with Mother Nature herself. Aphrodite emerging from the ocean is a classic example of Venus imagery, as is Cupid with his bow. No matter how old or jaded you are, when this card appears, it is a sign that attraction is at an all time high. The laboratory is alight with love. You may be in love with the work, the materials, with another person, or with the world itself. Seeing beauty in small moments is a sign Venus is in balance, an obligatory reminder that pleasure and pain are usually found intertwined. Venus is about what feels good. Venus is the planet of pleasure. And I am very familiar with Venus because Venus is my ruler. Um, and I think Taurus, we tend to evaluate things based on how they make us feel. And so a Taurus that is unevolved is going to be materialistic, you know, kind of lazy, kind of self-indulgent. But a Taurus that is evolved knows how to use their heart as the compass for what is right for them. A Taurus that is evolved knows that even if the path seems rocky to get there, to get the thing, if their heart tells them that that thing is going to feel really good, they're willing to put in the steady work to obtain it. And I think you're embodying a little bit about of that here. That's why I'm talking about it. Between the Star, the Son of Cups, and the Three of Wands, it's almost like you're using this Son of Cups as your guide towards the star. Like usually people would see the star as the guiding light towards your hopes and dreams, but it feels like you're using your heart as your guide towards figuring out what it is you want to pursue. And in September, it looks like there are possibilities opening up for you, opportunities showing up for you. But then in November, we have the Mother of Wands, Ten of Pentacles upright, and Daughter of Pentacles in the reverse. And we end the year with the World and the Moon in reverse. The World is upright. The imagery that I got with the Mother of Wands is kind of a rocky bicycle, like a first ride, where you get on the bike and you're kind of wobbling all over the place. And so it's like we have all this beautiful energy here in July, August, September, where you're just like, I think I'm feeling like I want to go in this direction. But then in October, you're like, hold up. Hold on. Wait. I'm not sure. And I say that because the Mother of Wands is about protecting what you have. If you look at her body is coiled around her eggs and a stick. And she is in a very like defensive position. That's the thing about snakes. A lot of people talk about snakes and say they're aggressive. They're not aggressive, they're defensive. Snakes are not aggressive. They would rather not use their venom on you because it takes forever to replenish. And while they're trying to replenish their venom, they are in a vulnerable position. So they are kind of programmed to avoid at all costs having to use that venom. And it's not until they really feel like they are threatened and there's no way out that they will use it. And even when they're not venomous, they'd rather not get in an altercation with any other animal. They'd rather, I mean, in the wild, nobody really wants a fight. Because unlike us, they can't just call 911 if they get very injured. They're going to have to spend weeks vulnerable and unable to hunt. And while they're recovering from this injury, they have nothing to eat. And if they have nothing to eat, they're weakening. And so that puts them at a lot of risk. So basically, animals, unless they're a predator animal, kind of like lions or tigers or whatever, they're kind of programmed to avoid conflict, snakes included. And so they're defensive, not aggressive. But anyway, the Mother of Wands, she is in the position of a snake that's just trying to defend itself and defend what it has. So it's like in October, you go through this process of dissolving in the first half of the year. You start kind of swimming your way towards, it almost feels like a swimming energy for some reason, swimming your way towards something that feels right for you. But then there's also a part of you that wants to hold on to what you've already built. You know, for whatever reason, there's a feeling that if you pursue this new thing, there's some of what you've already built for yourself that has to be let go of. And then in November, we see the Ten of Pentacles and the Daughter of Pentacles in reverse. And that tells me that you choose whatever is more abundant. Ten of Pentacles, I also want to note, is about building a life with another person. I usually don't do situational readings. I'm more interested in the psychology behind the energies. But this here almost feels like an attraction. Like, for example, right? An attraction to someone. And you're like, wait, but if I get with them, then I'm going to have to give up my house. I'm going to have to give up, I don't know, a job and move to them or something like that. So there's that hesitation over here in October, of everything that you're going to have to give up in order to gain something that feels right to you. And these November cards here feel like you're starting to understand that it's about merging. It's not a loss, it's a gain for everyone involved. It's about merging, building together. Another thing that's coming to mind there is it's also almost like you're so used to carrying things on your shoulders alone that it's not occurring to you that merging with someone else could be beneficial to you too. Not to make it sound transactional, but it's almost like you're not factoring in the part where the other person wants to help you too, or that this job actually wants to see you grow, or whatever the situation is. It's almost like that's not even occurring to you because that's not what you're used to. And that brings us back to the Mother of Wands energy of protecting what you have over reaching for something more than what you have. And then in December, we have the World and the Moon in reverse. And that tells me that the part that you've over identified with, the part of you that you've insisted needed to stay, was only there for survival out of necessity. Because the moon is also about hidden fears. And it's almost like in the process of dissolving, you're also kind of getting a little more in tune or aware of your fears and where they came from and why. So you're becoming a little more conscious of the ways in which those fears have held you back. And something that I've learned from personal experience is that when you've been abused for so long, or you've been through a lot, there are parts of you that develop to keep you safe in those situations. They develop to protect you, and they are for your sake. But then there comes a point eventually where those defenses, those protection mechanisms, no longer have a place. And that's kind of been part of me healing my avoidance, is that you'll encounter situations where all of the things that you've learned to do to keep yourself safe actually become the very thing that jeopardizes your newfound happiness. And there are a lot of people who choose to keep those defenses because they're kind of their security blanket. It's what keeps them safe or keeps them feeling safe. But the problem is that, Japanese houses were built purely with wood. They don't really use too much concrete or cement or, hard materials there. And the structures that have stood for centuries in Japan are made purely of wood. And they do that because Japan gets a lot of earthquakes. And so these buildings, these structures, haven't stood for as long as they have because they're so tough and rigid. They've survived because they're flexible and they bend and sway with the earthquakes. And so basically what I'm getting at here is that it's time for you to be adaptable. You know, you've adapted to the dangers of your life, to abuse, to, I don't know, unpredictable situations like job loss or, lack of funds, or whatever. And you've adapted to that. You've adapted to that to survive in those situations. Now you have to adapt to situations where your armor has to stay at the door. Now you have to adapt to situations where you have to turn to the other person when you're scared instead of hiding in the closet. You have to adapt to situations where your vulnerability is the very thing that is needed for it to survive. That's what I'm getting here. Because we don't talk enough about the part of healing that looks like a blossoming. People talk about protecting their peace and healing or moving on or whatever. But really, what they're doing is they're picking up tools for survival. They're picking up defense mechanisms, not inner peace. Healing feels like inner peace. And I think that's what this is you're changing from the version of you that felt like a sewer rat just trying to survive. You're changing from the version of you that felt tough and hard to kill. And you're learning to become softer. And when you become softer, you become more able to love. Because then you're not looking at other people like they're threats. You're simply appreciating their presence. And in the back pocket, you'll always have all of the tools that you've picked up in survival mode. You'll always have your means of protecting yourself. And you know that. You've become tough and you know that. So go ahead and keep your sword close, but take a nap. It's kind of one of those things where it's like if you're so sure of your own strength, then you can afford to put it down for a second. Finally, let's read the moon from the alchemy deck. Mystery, receptivity, intuition. The moon represents the mother of all mysteries. Once a month, it slips into the full spotlight and then quietly disappears, only to initiate the cycle again. Gifting us with the message of impermanence, the moon reminds us we are in constant transition, a continual process of letting go. It is the yin principle, one of listening rather than speaking. This card may indicate a time of rest and restoration is in order, or that a new depth of spiritual practice calls. Dreams and memories may be especially vivid. The gates to the liminal realm have opened. The alchemist's task is to be receptive to its message. Be patient, though, as the moon speaks in the language of symbols, and deciphering its messages takes time and receptivity. Magic is afoot. Sink into it, sweet child. So, going into the overarching energy, the Nine of Wands. This is a very jam-packed year as far as your inner world goes. Because the Nine of Wands is about hope and persistence. Like if you look at the traditional tarot, like this guy looks beat up and he's still holding up his stick. Like, I'm still ready to go, man. And this feels like that final push, that final fight. But it's not to go in the same direction that you've always gone before. It's not to maintain that boundary line. It's about everything that you've been through and everything that you're about to become. You know what this tells me is that after everything that you've been through, you're tired. And maybe the key is that you're not supposed to keep fighting the same fight. You're supposed to fight a different one. You're supposed to dissolve instead of maintaining your rigidity. You're supposed to soften instead of hardening your shell. And that's harder to do because then you're fighting yourself. It's easy to stand toe to toe with a grown man and take up your space and toe the line and say, I'm not moving, after years, decades of being abused by them. And this can go both ways. But I'm a woman, so I'm going to speak from the perspective of a woman. After decades of being abused by men, it's easy, when you heal and you develop your tools of survival to become strong enough and hard enough and brave enough to stand toe to toe with one and say, look, I'm not moving. What are you going to do? Hit me? Especially if you've been hit before? That part's not scary anymore. But what really takes courage is after decades of being abused by one and having to stand toe to toe with any man beyond that that's shown you aggression. What's really hard is learning how to love one again. What's really hard is learning how to be vulnerable with one again. What takes so much more courage than fighting one is learning how to put your weapons down in front of one. That's what your last battle is. This isn't about hustling harder, pushing harder, becoming tougher. This isn't about any of that. This is about dissolving into softness when it scares the ever living dookies out of you. That is the scarier thing to do. So, Cancer, 2026 is going to be very, very transformative for you. But it seems like you're fighting for the last shred of yourself that still believes in love, still believes in happiness, despite having existed in survival mode for so long. And I hope that that pays off for you. I hope that that is something that turns out to be worthwhile for you. So, anyway, I will be putting out the zodiac readings kind of at my own pace at this point because I'm just kind of enjoying having so much time off of work right now. I'm off until the 2nd, so hopefully I can get them all done by then. But I am prioritizing rest and relaxation right now. So honestly, I'll get the rest of the zodiac out when I get it. So anyway, hope you like what you saw here today. And if you did like what you saw here today, please feel free to like, share, comment to help me out with the algorithm, subscribe, and hit that notification button so that you get notified every time I post a video. And I'll see you in the next one.